Pradeep, it's a pleasure to have you again.
Thank you.
It's exciting. Last time we met, you were the dean and very well recognized dean of engineering at Carnegie Mellon.
Right.
Now you are the de facto CEO, which is the Chancellor for the University of California, San Diego. It's a big university system, as you just mentioned earlier. It's about $3.5 billion budget that you run,
right.
Out of which pleasantly surprising is the fact that it is $1 billion focused on research. It ranks you sixth in the country, you
That's
said.
right.
How does it, feel to go from pure academia, which is dean of engineering, to running a big institution, part of the biggest, university system?
So, when I was approached to apply for this job, and I did, I thought it was only a matter of scale, like the dean, $200 million college, would scale 17 times and then I would know what to do. But now that I have been in this position as Chancellor for about a year and a half, I realized that nothing ever prepared me to be Chancellor. I mean, what I did as dean, I interacted a lot with the faculty and a lot with the administration, and now I interact very little with the faculty, and I am the administration. Right? But having said that, I think what really prepares you to do this job and to be successful at this is really building a value system as you are going through academia, through assistant professor, through all the administrative ranks. To understand what is important, what's not, and what you want to focus on and what you don't want to focus on.
So, but when you run a large university system like this, on a personal level, do you think the creativity part has to be put on the back burner because you're so engrossed now into running the administration?
Well, you would think so, but I have found a way for that not to be the case, for creativity to be part of it. So, for example, the big difference is as you abstract out. So now I deal with, before I dealt with the departments and I understood how to deal with the faculty and how to create incentive structures. Now I deal with multiple departments, multiple divisions on colleges, with multiple cultures, right? So I have to now figure out what is a single policy that should be put in place that is going to be common to all of these cultures and bring us to and take us down the right path. And what I have found out is that typically is a function of policies I put in place and a function of me talking. So when I talk, as much as I like to joke, it turns out people listen to me very seriously and then they take it very seriously and things happen.
Let us focus a bit on the education system. I was talking to you earlier and you mentioned that the disparity in education that you see in India, which keeps growing between the rich and the poor, and
right.
the access to good education, you see that now happening in this country,
right.
Which should raise a big concern amongst many people. And running the university is again a challenge because obviously you want to reach out to as many people
right.
as possible to bring them into the fold. I wanted to share your thoughts.
So, ever since I've been in the U.S., people have talked about the third world and the developing world and so on and so forth. And in the last 5 years or so, I've been thinking about what makes something a third world. And the more I've thought about it, the more I've realized it's not infrastructure, it is not roads, it is not bridges. I mean, those are like the obvious things. I think what makes a country a third world country is where the economy is causing more and more disparity between the rich and the poor. The divide's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and not everybody is participating or partaking in the growth of the economy. Okay, now come back to the US. Post-World War II, we've had the largest expansion in the history of mankind, economic expansion, where we created a middle class that never existed, in numbers that never existed, where the whole country was pretty much a middle class dominated country. Lately, what we are finding is that the middle class is shrinking and the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, which by itself would not bother me personally. But in that process, access to education, and which is why people are complaining about the cost of education, is also bifurcating, where the rich have more access to education and the poor have less access to education. And in my mind, that is the beginning of the turn, where we are turning towards being a third world country. And as the leader of, I think, one of the top 10 institutions in the world, I want to be leading the charge of reducing the disparity, of making education accessible, and going back to the egalitarian view of education.
So when you, for comparison's sake, you look at Carnegie Mellon and you look at the state-run University of California system, which is amongst the, like you said, the best universities, Berkeley, UCLA, San Diego. Is there an advantage because it is a state-run and you have more access to reach out to the communities versus the private institutions, you think, or no?
So I think all institutions of higher education have an imperative, which is to educate to the best of your ability as many people as you possibly can. I think as a public university, our mission is slightly different and more inclusive than it would be in a private university. But having said that, there's nothing about a private university that excludes them or precludes them from having a similar mission, right? It's just a matter of how much funding you have available and what the priorities are. But as a public institution, we are mandated by the state as to what the priorities should be at the very minimum.
Right. So when you're talking about spreading education to the deserving classes, this initiative of MOOC, the initiative of online education, most of these big Ivy League institutions are now putting their courses online. So it's still in the initial stages. So people have invested money and are waiting to see the impact, both in terms of ROI and the social impact to its constituents. What is your take on this?
So I have a little bit of a finessed view on this. So I think the fact that technology has not had as big an impact on education in the last 20 years as it has in other fields is about right. With that said, I think MOOCs will have an impact, but let me just give you my finessed view. Just let's take an undergraduate education. This education is mainly 18 to 22-year-old. That's the time period in your life. In that time period, it's not just about content acquisition, which is what MOOCs would be all about, but it's also about developing your personality, developing your identity, emotional development, intellectual development, understanding how to work with people of multiple cultures, understanding how to work with people of multiple ethnicities and languages. These things cannot happen by sitting at home and studying in your pajamas, as a famous commercial says. Well, for these things, you have to be in the middle of a set of people, a diverse community. That's why, as Chancellor, I think it's really important that I focus on building a diverse community and providing an experience to a student that would be not very dissimilar from an experience when you would go out in the world and what you would see. Because these 4 years would help you. And MOOCs have no impact on this. Right? MOOCs are impactful in content delivery and content acquisition. But now, with that said, I think at the master's level, which is more professional education, I see MOOCs making a difference. I see reducing the cost of education there. But unfortunately, that's only a year or 2-year education period. And by that time, the rich have gotten educated and they can afford to pay more, and the poor have still not gotten an undergraduate degree. Right? So it's a very complicated dynamic that one has to think about.
As a leader now of one of the prestigious institutions in the world, if I were to ask you, what else for the next goals of the institution now as the new Chancellor?
So I think personally I have several goals. One is we want to define ourselves or redefine ourselves as a student-centered institution. And what that means is every decision we make, every choice we make is focused around, is it good for the student or is it not? So in 6 months, if and when I have the choice to make about should we work with somebody to offer MOOCs to undergrads, my focus is not going to be on is it going to save money or not. My focus is going to be on is this good for my 18 to 22-year-old student? If my son were in this position, would this be good for him? If my daughter were in this university, would this be good for her, right? So that's the way I think about it. And I think if we think that way, we have the opportunity to really reform the whole institution. Secondly, we are putting our strategic plan together, and it's a very aspirational plan. So one of the goals is understanding and saving the planet. So we have a very deep interest in understanding the environment, energy, food and fuel issues, and how does it impact this planet, this earth that we live on, and how do we make this earth a better place, right? The second goal is going to be vertically integrating discovery, engineering, and therapies, because we are one of the best hospital systems in the country, and we can go from discovering some basic scientific phenomenon to creating therapy based on that. And the third one is going to be understanding and improving society. I think we are not taking enough advantage of humanities, arts, and social sciences and what we learn from them to understand multiple cultures, to understand ethnicities, to understand how people interact with each other, to understand what makes people work with each other, what makes people hate each other. And I think we need to do more of that.